Today, I'm walking you through the making of a full song that I made on the Model Cycles. I did all the composition and sound design on the Cycles itself, and then recorded the individual tracks and mixed and structured them in my DAW. And I'm going to show you every step of the process. All that being said, let's get into it. All right, so this song is divided into two separate sections contained within two separate projects. So let's start off with the first one. You've heard the processed version in the intro. Here is the unprocessed version. So, getting into the individual elements, let's start off with the kick. This is a custom preset, fairly simple in its conception. The kick color is at 47-ish. The shape is also around that range. So if you turn it down, it's fairly muted. If you turn it up, it gives that kind of nasty distortion. So I'm just going for a subtle amount of grit, essentially, from both of these knobs. And then contour kind of clamps down on the sound. You're going to see this over and over again, so it's not turned up super high. And then sweep, also not turned up super high. I'm not going for this crazy punchy kick, more of a muted bass element, and it just kind of floats under the rest of the mix. This snare is, if I recall correctly, a preset. It is fairly simple. The color is not turned up super high, so it's not super dissonant. And the shape is turned up all the way. And you can almost hear the physical snares, which is basically some crunchy white noise. And then contour is down fairly low, as is sweep. Up next is the hi-hat, which is just dead simple. The color is turned down fairly low, which is the main thing giving it its sound. Shape is in the middle-ish, and then sweep is also around the middle-ish. Contour is all the way down. Super dry, super simple. Up next, this is a preset pretty much just taken directly from the built-in preset bank, and it's called Boat, which is fun. SY, boat, SY for synth. So this is a chord engine patch, and not a whole lot of crazy stuff going on. The main thing giving it its sound is the LFO. So that's sent to sweep here. So if I turn the depth all the way down, that would basically just be the sweep parked on a tonality that's fairly electric piano-ish. And that's being modulated pretty fast, scanning through the different tonalities of the synth's timbre, giving it this scratchy sound that I immediately gravitated towards. This is also a preset. This is SY Diver. And you can hear why it's called that, because of the little pitch drop, which is fun. That's also being taken care of by the LFO. There's an envelope in here, and it's sent to the pitch, just dropping it down an octave after a certain amount of time. For the actual synth parameters, color is turned up to 8. So you can hear the effect that has. So it sounds like a couple different tones at a couple different octaves. Shape is around the middle. You can hear how that affects the aggressiveness of the sound, especially in the attack. And then contour is turned up a fair bit, and that controls the pluckiness of the sound, which you're going to see again as well. Just for good measure, here's sweep. Not having a massive effect. And finally, for this project, the little electric guitar-ish element, which is really nice. And this is a modified preset. So let me actually pull up the original preset to show you how I've shaped the sound here. So here is the original preset that I used. You can hear it's fairly aggressive, but that's what gave me the idea for this melody. So the first thing I did was just turn it to 0 in the pitch department, just so it would be an octave higher. Pretty straightforward so far. And then here's the major thing. The sweep is set high-ish in the original preset. If I turn it down, tames the sound really nicely. And then I can mess with the shape to give it this more muted characteristic. I don't remember exactly what I parked it on, but you get the idea. And also I should mention that the color, the FM parameter, is set to 1.001. So it's a fairly simple sound, especially when you get rid of that really aggressive beginning. And I really like how it turns out. And you'll see when I get to the DAW portion that it takes an amp sim quite well as well. And now in a separate project entirely, here is the other section of the song, kind of the B section. And this was made in the same session, and I realized later on that these two projects had very similar vibes, very similar tempos, and were in the same key, so I figured I could merge them, and that ended up working out pretty well. So let's get into the individual elements of this. Custom kick. Color is turned up quite a bit. The grit that it adds is really nice, and then this distortion is coming from shape here. That can get pretty nasty. I'm not really using the volume plus distortion because the distortion is cumulative, and so that'll start distorting my other elements in ways that could be kind of unpleasant. So I ended up doing a little bit of distortion enhancement in my DAW later, which I'll show you in a bit. I should also show you where the sweep is. I did want to give it a fairly well-defined punch. Moving on to the snare. Very simple. Color is fairly low, shape is fairly high, and then the decay is super short. Just a short little high-pitched snare element. This hi-hat has some modulation going on via the LFO. It is modulating the shape. And you can hear it sent to the delay a bit. So that's always just evolving a little bit. This element is the synth engine. Nice even setting for the FM amount at 4. The shape is fairly high. You hear how dull it gets when you get lower. But you go too high, it gets pretty sharp. And then the contour is up fairly high, giving it that pluck characteristic. You're going to see that again in a second because of the ARP element. I really like this element and how it turned out. So, the color is turned up to 3. Just finding sweet spots. The tone shape is partially responsible for the aggression of the sound. As is sweep. And then contour I'm messing with by turning it up to turn it into a pluck. So here's what I did. When recording the individual tracks of my cycles, I just muted and unmuted tracks and then hit play and slowly turned this knob until it was in its original position of 9. So contour is getting changed right now. That brings it in a really nice way. From a pluck to this more kind of gritty ARP element. And then if I want to take that even further, I can start messing with shape. To make it more aggressive. And so I made sure to capture turning both of those knobs independently of each other to increase the aggressiveness of this sound over time. Give some movement to the track. And finally, this very nice chord element. A lot of it's pretty straightforward, to be honest. I just parked it on a nice sweep spot. All of these are fairly metallic, but this one was nice and mellow. Contour's not really doing much here. Shape is set to minor. And then the color is at 107-ish. You can just park it in a general location around there. Doing this weird little chromatic thing. Which I usually end up writing weird chromatic stuff on this thing because of the way the keyboard is laid out. All that being said, let's jump into the DAW. And you can see that this is separated out by song section. And there's quite a bit of processing, a lot of it fairly standard to the mixing techniques that I use, and I'll link a more detailed video on my process for mixing Groovebox tracks at the end of this video. But for now, let's just go into this rapid fire. First of all, that main chord sound, got an EQ, taming a bit of that sub, a dimension expander, adding some width, spaced out by Baby Audio, adding some subtle reverb and delay. You're going to see this multiple times. Crystallizer by Soundtoys. It starts off with nothing, and then over time gets automated in. So it's a pitched up delay, which I just adore the sound of. And finally, tape mellow fiber arteria. Subtle, but I quite like the effect that that has. Next up. I am filtering out some excess low end. I am filtering the synth in for its introduction. That goes to arrangement. And I've got Comeback Kid by Baby Audio. Just a simple ping-pong delay. Fairly clean. We've got your kind of electric guitar synth, and to drive that point home, we'll get back to that. So let me get into the processing for the normal version first. Once again, cutting some lows that just don't need to be there. Simple ping-pong delay again. And then I'm adding some extra reverb and delay, some reversed delay, using spaced out again. I like Baby Audio plugins, okay? I use them probably too much. And then I've got a separate layer of the same synth. So a pitch plugin, adding an octave lower, an EQ, Grind Machine by Audio Salt. That's my amp sim of choice. And then Comeback Kid on top. Subtly mix those together. And my background light turned off. That's rude. Up next, we've got your drums. So the hi-hats start out fairly simple, and then I've added this instance of Infiltrator that adds all these little glitches and beat repeats, which really goes a long way towards the kind of IDM sound of this track, in my opinion. I've also done some processing to this 808. Well, 808. A bit of parallel compression. And Baby Audio's plugin Parallel Aggressor. Here's without, here's with. So some subtle parallel distortion and a bit more parallel compression. I've been vibing on this plugin lately. And in this next section, I don't think the snare has a whole lot done to it. That reverb is already from the cycles itself. A little bit of EQ, a little bit of parallel compression to flatten out that transient, give it a little more punch. All that together gives you this. This sounds to me like a tune for like the intro screen of Risk of Rain or something like that, which was absolutely the inspiration. From there, I just let all that stuff reverberate out to drop you into your second half, essentially. Very similar processing here. Some EQ. This volume adjustment plugin is just here to slowly turn the audio of the ARP down a little bit as it gets more aggressive in the final section. It gets super loud, and I just needed to even it out somehow. And Comeback Kid again. I especially like how it sounds on this more percussive sound. So that sits there by itself for a while, and then we drop in this. So first, spaced out again. Nice and lush. Reverb and delay combo. Super VHS. That gives it this warble and this width. Especially this magic button here. It's like a chorus effect. Taming that a bit in the low end department, adding some extra highs, and once again, that pitched up delay brings the sound to life. Layered with that is the same part, but I've tweaked the patch on the cycles itself. Bit of saturation with parallel aggressor. Super VHS, which is adding more saturation. Together, I love how this sounds. In my mind, this is friggin' gorgeous. With that, 808. Tiny low cut. Parallel aggressor, bring out some upper harmonics. This infiltrated hi-hat. In this case, I've actually layered it with the original. No processing on this snare at all. And then very similar processing, just a nice reverse delay and reverb. And a low-end taming EQ. So, now that I've shown you all of that, here is the full song. If you'd like to see some more model cycles, you can click or tap up over here somewhere. And if you'd like to see my general process for mixing and mastering Groovebox tracks, you can click or tap up over here. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll be back with a new video in a little bit.